So this is the film story of a mad scientist. He was so ambitious about snakes that he wanted to turn humans into snakes, for which he did a lot of experiments and finally made a medicine that could turn humans into snakes to test this medicine. He injects the injections of this medicine to his assistant and tells his assistant to not worry, these are some antidotes that will not let any virus grow in your body, but he didn't know that the professor was lying to him. Time passed and his condition started to change slowly. His skin started to come off, and along with that, the scales of the snake came on his body from the bottom. Half of his body turned into a snake, but he was still half human along with all these things. He also lost many human powers, such as he couldn't speak, couldn't walk, and couldn't even tell anyone about his suffering. The scientist took advantage of this weakness and sold him to a circus, and then decided to do a new experiment with the money he got from the circus in the first experiment. His assistant was only half a snake. He wanted to turn a human into a snake even in the circus. The scientist's experiment goes wrong. People come from far away to see this strange creature, half human and half snake, but no one knew that this was the result of a wrong experiment by the doctor. Then the professor is shown, who is looking for a new boy. Obviously, he wants to do an experiment on him. For this, he meets one of his professor friends and tells him that I need an assistant. My old assistant has left me. He says that I am doing a new experiment for which I need help. The other professor, who is also his friend, asks him about this experiment, but the scientist doesn't answer him. Then the professor tells the scientist about a boy, his name was David, who had a lot of interest in science. He was also looking for a part-time job from where he could get experience, and if he was under a scientist, he could really learn a lot. David was also very happy to hear about this new job. He comes to his lab with the scientist without much questioning, where for the first day, the scientist tells him about a lot of new snakes. David notices that the scientist has kept these snakes in different categories and had also put a label on it. The red label meant that these snakes were very dangerous. If it bites, the person will die immediately. Green tag meant that these snakes were not poisonous. Yellow tag meant that these snakes were poisonous, but there was a way to get rid of them. The scientist tells him, "Don't worry, I have the venom of all these snakes, which is the cure for all the poison in these snakes. Even the mamba snake is the most poisonous. A drop of its venom was enough to kill 10 people. If a snake bites, a person can die within an hour, and the person doesn't know that it was bitten by a snake before dying. He feels symptoms like a heart attack." The scientist also teaches him how to remove the venom of this snake. After listening to the scientist, David asks the scientist, "What will I do here?" The scientist tells him before giving any answer, "The job will be seen later. First, I will give you an injection. Don't worry. This is just a venom, and you are only being injected because if any snake bites you here, at least your life will not be in danger." David also agrees to the scientist, and he gets the injection without thinking that this could have been an experiment. It was told in the movie that the vaccine that was given to David was made from the genes of the cobra snake. If a snake bites a normal person, then often a person cannot escape its venom anyway. After getting the injection, the scientist and David start talking, and in the meantime, it is time to eat. We learn that from now on, David was going to stay at the scientist's house. When he was eating, David suddenly started feeling sick. He started having a headache, and he was also feeling very dizzy. The scientist tells him not to worry, these are the symptoms of the vaccine. The scientist's daughter takes him to his room, and we see that the scientist was sitting in his room at night. David was also having strange dreams at night, and in the dream, he was just looking at the snakes. He was also feeling very hot. He kept sleeping till late in the morning. He heard a noise outside his house. He went outside and saw that a lot of people were gathered outside the house. All of them had come to see the scientist's tent, in which the scientist was going to extract the venom of a cobra without any protection. The scientist was very expert in this, but every time he did this, he was very careful. He knew that a small mistake of his could kill him. A photographer was also standing there. As soon as the photographer takes a photo of the cobra gets angry because of the flash coming out of the camera. In anger, he was about to attack the scientist, but fortunately, the scientist survived. Finally, he caught the cobra and extracted its venom. Everyone applauded him and gave him a reward with this money. He used to do his experiments, but now day by day, this money was getting less. A few days passed, and it was shown that David's skin was coming off. Seeing this, he got very scared when he asked the doctor about this. The doctor said that this is a side effect of the vaccine. In fact, he himself helps him to get rid of his skin. He also said that getting rid of skin is a good sign. It means that the vaccine is working well. David said that now he likes the cold. He doesn't like to stay in the heat, but still the scientist tells him whatever it is, always wear a jacket. Meanwhile, the police come to the scientist's house. They were actually looking for the scientist's assistant. They were actually looking for the scientist's house and lab. The scientist goes there for this because he knew that the police would not get any evidence from here when they come inside the lab. They see that the scientist's daughter was looking at a very big python, even in picking it up and taking it to another room. These officers help her despite searching here. When the officers do not get anything, the officers just leave from here anyway. It is shown that the scientist used to give some vaccine to David every day, and he didn't even ask David why all this. A month had passed since then. He used to get hallucinations of snakes, but still he used to work in the lab. He started liking the scientist's daughter Christina, and maybe Christina too. Both of them go to another city to buy some snakes on their way back. They stop to see the circus. There was also a snake show going on here. They hear that there is a human-like snake here, there is a creature here that is half human and half snake. Christina didn't like this at all. She wasn't interested in seeing it, but David was interested. He buys a ticket and goes inside, where he sees the scientist's assistant. Actually, he was David's senior. When he saw David, he recognized him. He wanted to tell David that the doctor did all this to him, but unfortunately, he couldn't say. He started recognizing David, but then he ignored him and came out. He comes out and sees that a boy was harassing Christina. Christina tells David about this, and David starts fighting with this girl. That girl was much stronger than David and was defeating David, but then suddenly David's blood started boiling strangely. He started behaving like a snake, as if there was a snake inside him, and like a snake, he starts biting the other girl. Obviously, he was a human, so he didn't hurt the other person, and the police came and took care of everything. Christina and David go home, but the boy with whom David fought, he didn't forget his fight. He wanted revenge, so he quietly follows them, and then he comes to Christina's house in the middle of the night. He tries to enter Christina's room, but before he could go inside, suddenly, a cobra clings to his hand. This was actually Christina's pet. This boy panics when he sees it and falls down to save himself and kills this snake. As soon as David, the scientist, and Christina came down, they saw that the snake was dead. This boy took his snake and went away saying bad things about him, but now Christina was very sad to see her snake die, and seeing Christina, her dad too, he wanted to take his daughter's revenge from that boy, so he takes his lab's most poisonous snake and goes to that boy's house and quietly leaves that snake in his force room. When that boy was bathing, the snake bit him. As soon as the snake bit him, the boy died, and the scientist's revenge was fulfilled after that. The scientist came back to his house with his snake at home. He felt that Christina and David were close to each other. Knowing this, he was shocked, and he went and started scolding Christina. Christina was surprised because her dad had never reacted like this to her before, so why now? Her dad says, "I can't make you understand. All I'm saying is that you have to stay away from David and understand this," to the extent that now the scientist locks David in a room near his lab, in a room where there was no mirror. Something strange was happening to him. His body's color had changed, his face had changed, and there were scales like small snakes on his body. It was clear that the scientist's experiment was working at this time. Christina also wanted to meet David, but the scientist stopped her, saying that she was sick and the vaccine was having a negative effect on her. But when Christina insists, she sends him to another city to get snakes. After this, the scientist came back to David and told him to drink something because he was sick. The scientist says, "Drink this and you'll be fine." David drinks it without thinking, and after drinking this, he started having a severe stomachache. He felt as if all the organs of his body were shrinking. He tells the scientist not to take him to the hospital, but the scientist says, "No, I'll give you an injection and you'll be fine." Before the scientist gives him an injection, he hears someone's car outside the house. It was a professor who came to meet David. Actually, David hadn't been coming to the university for a long time, and now the professor had a doubt that there must be a scientist behind this because a boy from his university has disappeared. As soon as he sees him, the scientist comes out. The professor tells him that "I want to meet David," but the scientist refuses, saying that he is not well. The professor, who had completely lost his mind, he went away from here in front of the scientist, but then he quietly went to his lab where he saw that David had completely changed. David also wanted to talk to him, wanted to ask him for help, but now that he was turning into a snake, so he couldn't speak. The scientist also saw the professor near his lab. It was obvious that if the professor had gone out of here, then all his cover would have been exposed, so he attacks the professor from behind and brings him to his lab, after which he also killed the professor by cutting him with a snake. As soon as the professor meets, the scientist gets a call from Christina, who was saying that "I have come to the pet shop, but there was no snake cleaver in our name." The cleaver was not there because the scientist had not ordered any snake. Now the scientist excuses him that "You wait there for a while. Maybe there will be some time for the delivery." Christina agrees with him this time too, but where did he spend so much time? Then the shopkeeper tells him to go to the circus nearby. There is also a snake show there. You can see something from there. He tells that there is also a snake there that is half human and half snake. Christina had heard about this before. Now he had extra time, so he thought why not see it. When he reached the circus, He saw that the circus was closed, but now he had to see the snake anyway, so he quietly went inside the snake camp, and there he was finally seen as his dad's first assistant, which was now a weird creature because of his experiment. A snake and a human from above. Christina did not take a second to recognize him, and she also understood that all this was done by her dad. It was not too late for her to understand that her dad had sent her to another city according to a plan, and now David's life is also in danger. To save his life, she leaves for her house without wasting time. Now in the city of scientists, we are shown that the boy who was killed by the scientists to avenge his daughter, his wife, also came to the police to file an FIR. She told the police that because this boy had killed a scientist's snake, so she was sure that the scientist had killed him to take revenge. Now the police were about to take action. After that, the police got another report against the scientist. The professor's family also told the police that the professor had gone to the scientist's house for the last time and then did not return from there. Before that, the scientist had an assistant brother, and still the scientist's second assistant was not going to the university. After getting so much news, it was necessary to investigate. The police, she goes to the scientist's house here in the lab. Now the scientist was experimenting on David. He puts David on a stretcher and gives him another injection. David's body had already been transformed into a snake, but after this injection, there are more changes in his body. Suddenly his mouth shrinks and becomes a snake, and his legs become a dome, and he becomes a complete cobra. Seeing this, the scientist was very happy. His experiment was successful. He makes the real cobra fight with this cobra made by David. The scientist was having a lot of fun seeing all this fight, but how long would it be fun? Because of all the bad things he had done, now good was not going to happen to him. The real cobra cuts the scientist because of the scientist's carelessness, and as soon as it cuts, the scientist dies. In the meantime, Christina also arrives here. She saw her dad dying, so she screamed at the zoo. Her scream attracted the cobra to her before the cobra killed her. The police who came to catch the scientist saved Christina. Inside, we are shown that where David was made into a snake's enemy, Nahola, shot him and he ate David. At the end of the movie, David also died. Christina saw his death with her own eyes and she screamed at the cobra, and showing all this, the movie ends here on this scene.